Today, we're going to be exploring the question: how is it that two people who could be playing the same champion on the same server at the same rank have completely different views on the game? One person could think that champ's the strongest champion in the meta, another person can think that the champ is the weakest champ in the meta. They could build differently, they could view fights differently, they could view mid game macro differently. And it's always really fascinated, how does this happen? Why is it, or how is it that each and every single one of us has such a unique and kind of individual league lens? And so today we're going to be exploring the concept of understanding and developing your league lens. And I want to start with a little quote here from Mission Impossible. I've been watching the movies recently, and there was a moment in the films where they were like, every moment and every choice has led to this one moment. And I'm like, you know what? It kind of rings true for League, how every single choice in our league journeys, such as the role you decided to main, at the beginning of your journey, the season you started playing league, the champs you decided to main, the champions you maybe relied on banning. Maybe you decided to ban Zed for a few years because you didn't want to deal with it. The amount of normal games or ARAMs versus ranked games, how intense you were during those games. Did you review these games at all? Or if have you reviewed at all during your journey? What stage 4 issues that you've had to deal with during your journey? Or did you duo queue? And if you did have a duo, what role did your duo play? So every single choice throughout our journey leads to the type of player we kind of eventually become. And I've always liked viewing, our own league identity through this whole skill tree metaphor where, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, we kind of spec into particular strengths or skills, and we kind of leave other areas quite maybe open to weakness, right? So I might be the type of player that is specialized into the mechanics aspect of the game. I want to be very good with my clicking, my spacing, my tethering, and I have this very unique skill tree, and every single one of us, in our league journey has this very unique skill tree that has particular strengths and weaknesses. And I've always kind of found this as a helpful metaphor because you can't have it all. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. We all have our own unique inclinations. We like particular aspects of the game. We're drawn to particular aspects of the game. We're drawn to particular kind of champion archetypes. And that means that, yes, we are all going to have kind of gaps in our knowledge, gaps in the way we view the game, and we're gonna all have our own little blind spots. And rather than talking about it, I want to go ahead and use an example to maybe illustrate the point a little bit more. So what we're looking at here is a little bit of a grubs fight from an MLA member from one of my recent reviews. And it was a bit of a complex one. We had Trundle on the grubs here. They were getting collapsed on by the Cho'Gath mid and Jarvan jungle. Alawi was late to move and also very low. Pantheon had R and Pantheon R'd in here. We wasted our E and it got very messy. It was a very complex scenario. And they didn't really know how to play it. Should he have ran away? Should he have helped the Trundle? Was it a micro mistake? Was it a macro mistake? What were the takeaways from this sequence? And when I review a lot of these plays, it's really interesting because I always think to myself, wow, there are so many ways this could play out, and there's so many lenses you could review this playthrough. You could look at it through a micro lens where, okay, I would min max the ability usage and positioning, whereby this E that the Talia does here in a second is a very rushed E. We should have held our E here. This was a wasted E. Okay, that's one component. The second component is maybe we could have conserved our workaround Q to save it for the fight instead of using it on the grubs. Maybe if we conserved our E and our Q, we could have gone for a really beautiful EWQ to one shot the Jarvan before the Pantheon R came in. You can view it through this very micro heavy lens. And then the bigger picture question is, okay, well, from a macro lens, why are we going for this? You could have maybe just got that second grub, realized that Allow is too low to move. Pantheon has R. We don't have flash. We don't have our ultimate. Let's just take that grub. And then the moment we see them come by, ping back, disengage, and just leave the last grub. And so all of these are viable and all of these are kind of true to a certain extent. And so the beautiful thing about League is that there is no one way to climb. So one person may over-index in that mechanical aspect and they may outplay their way through these grubs fights. Other people may be more cerebral. They may kind of be more holistic, thinking about the top lane move situation. They may understand how the junglers interact. They may be willing to call off plays more and be thinking about, what, I'm a level 7 Talia. I don't even have my Lost Chapter yet. Why am I kind of coin flipping the game at level 7? That would be another great question. And so we all have our own unique lens that we view the game through. And this is why it's actually very difficult in solo queue to kind of even communicate or build alignment with your teammates, because we all have such different gaming backgrounds and such different perspectives on what the best play is. And this is why there's so much bickering and arguing in game. Oh, you should have done that. You should have helped me going for this invade. And we all have our own little agendas based off the champ we play. But again, the perspective of what we think is the best way to go about this situation. I thought this was just not just a neat little example of how there are many ways to deconstruct one simple play. And for those of you who aren't already aware, we have a free school community where you'll find a beautiful community filled with people who are like minded, taking the game seriously, looking to develop a healthier relationship with the game. But also, you'll find a bunch of free resources. We have a climbing masterclass going over everything from how to review deaths, how to develop a process, the mindset needed to climb. We have a champ pool masterclass covering how to develop your own champion pool. And we also have regularly updated solo queue tier lists for every single role, and also at all ranks as well, which is a bonus. So check it out if you're interested. Link is in the description below. So, how far does this go? How far does this league lens extend into our league journey? And I really believe, in my hypothesis, that league lens influences everything from the way you think about plays inside the review. You may emphasize particular moments in the post-game review, and other plays you're going to completely skim over. It will influence how strong you perceive particular champions. You may think that a champion like Shaco is the most broken, overpowered champion ever, and you may think, or some other people may think the champion is garbage based. And this is obviously influenced by not only the champions that you've mained in the past, but maybe the champs that you currently main, and also the skills that you've developed. If you're a very maybe map aware player who's over indexed in threat assessment and staying alive, then you may not think Shaco is really that strong because he doesn't snowball in your games. Whereas someone else who takes a lot of coin flip plays and is not looking at the minimap may think Shaco is very obnoxious. How you perceive mid-game macro. Are you the type of person that loves winning via split pushing and loves and really believes that mid-game macro is all about split pushing and side laning and not really about neutral objectives and dueling, or vice versa? It influences how you go about fights and skirmishes. It influences what you perceive as strong in the meta. It influences how to build your champion, because at the end of the day, if you're a champion that has, or a player that has maybe a very strong belief in getting leads early and snowballing that lead and translating that lead, you may spec into more lane dominant runes. You might go airy and scorch and bone plating, whereas someone else who's maybe they're good at minimizing and they've got really good mid-game macro, and the way they view the game, they may potentially take setups that are a little bit more greedy. They might go rollers and seraphs and gathering storms and first strikes and phase rushes. And again, these are all viable. They're all viable takes. And again, this is all we're just talking about here, understanding how far your league lens really influences your league journey. And the last one, and it could even go to the extent of how balanced the rank system is. And we'll maybe come back to that one later on. I read a book a while ago. This is actually probably one of the most formative books I read at the beginning of my coaching journey back in 2017. Start with Why by Simon Sinek. And he kind of talks about this framework of why, how, and what. And I've really kind of, in a way, packages up for me in my own kind of coaching philosophy through the lens of champion identity. And you even see the term here, identity. And I remember when I read this book in 2017, I thought to myself, wow, this would be a really great way to really think about how champions work. And so basically the way this framework works is identity is the why. We have the why we do things is our, worldview, our beliefs, our purpose. And then we have our process, which is kind of like what we do, our habits, our system, our process. And then we have the outcomes, the way it actually manifests, right? And so I've always viewed this is kind of what I call stage 3 and stage 2 and stage 1. This is kind of what I use to this day as my coaching philosophy. And I think it's very important. And today, what we're really going to be talking about is how our kind of player identity, which is again this stage 3 here, our maybe our worldview, the way we believe the game should be played, what we believe our player identity is, the way we believe the mid game macro should be played. We have all these kind of identity level beliefs, and these are things that can go very deep as well about like what sort of player do I want to be? How do I perceive myself wanting to look on the Rift? It can go as deep as we really want it to. But again, our league lens really influences everything because it's fundamentally at the bottom of it's at the base of who you are as a player. It's really we're really touching on the identity level of who you are as a player. And if you are interested in learning more about this, highly recommend the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. So we will be referencing to this sort of framework throughout the video. Now, I want to use myself as a little bit of a case study. It's something silly, but I do think it's relevant. I started playing the game in season one, and I really doubled down in mages. I love playing mages, and my whole thing coming from an FPS background, I was very good at Counter Strike. I love skill shots, and my entire philosophy in gaming was all about how do I be as accurate as possible. And I used to be obsessed about one tapping people in Counter Strike back in the day, and all about being super efficient with my aim and my every single bullet that I did was had to be a headshot. And I took this into League, and the way I use League was okay, if I play champions with skill shots and I land all my skill shots, then theoretically the champions that I'm playing are going to be broken, because the way skill shots or skill shot oriented champions are balanced is that it factors in that you're probably going to miss some. But if I'm really, really, really good at skill shots, that would mean that I have an inherent advantage over everyone else. And so I had no help. Right, no one was telling me about League. I hadn't played any MOBAs. I didn't play Dota. I hadn't played Hon. So that was my own little kind of weird League lens that I created for myself back in season one. As a result, I really struggled into a lot of assassins, because my champions really struggled into assassins, and the skill set that I developed, I didn't really have the ability to handle these champs because my wave management and other areas of my gameplay weren't that good. So I inherently, over time, based off my League lens, developed a set of biases. I had a mage bias, I had a scaling bias, and I had a team fighting bias. And that really, got me into a bit of a rut on my journey. And it took me years to slowly unpack why I had these biases and how I could maybe deconstruct them and become a more well-rounded player. And I think we all have our own story, right? We all have our own story to tell. Why we are the player we are today, based off our maybe our formative decisions and things that we did very early on in our journey. And so my question to you guys as we're going through this video, what biases do you think you have to this day? And maybe where do you think those biases potentially stem from? And I think it's an interesting question, something that we should all probably ask ourselves. And I want to know, this is a bit of a limit test. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to explore this live with you guys. So I've always loved this kind of hierarchy of competence. I've used this a lot as a framework for helping people evolve, as a player. But I want to kind of take a bit of a spin on this, and I want to kind of frame it through the lens of hierarchy of awareness, because this is what really rings true for me. I feel like in the beginning of my journey in League of Legends, I was unconsciously unaware. I was not even aware of how I was literally unaware of how unaware I was. Okay. And so as I learned a little bit more about myself and I developed a little bit more mastery in the game, I become aware that I am actually very unaware. And then over time, I again developed my understanding of my League lens, and I started to understand why I am acting the way I was. And I started to become aware that, okay, I'm slowly becoming aware. And so over time, to the point where, this is again, speaking very personally, League was a tool or a vehicle to develop self-awareness and understand who I was as an individual. And so, yeah, we talk a lot about the hierarchy of competence, and you're unconsciously incompetent and consciously incompetent, and so on and so forth. For people who are unfamiliar with this framework, this is basically a framework of helping people understand their stages of where they're at in terms of competence in a particular skill, right? At the very beginning, you don't know what you don't know. And then you know how much you don't know. And then you know how much you know, and then so on and so forth, right? But for me, I've always viewed this, I like thinking about this in terms of awareness, and look, you could probably say this through many other, there's many other vehicles or tools to develop self-awareness. But for me, League was my passion. And I think through introspection and understanding my League lens and, circling back to that start with why, what is my player identity? Why did I believe the things that I did? Why was I acting the way that I did? And asking a lot of those deep hitting, hard hitting questions really, it in a way gave me a really beautiful lens or a really beautiful kind of vehicle to develop, an understanding of who I was. And it took me around 7 years, I would say, of playing League, to fully, get a grasp on what sort of person am I through League, and why am I acting the way I am. And, obviously this coincided with me developing as a person, as a man, right? I was 16 when I first started playing League, and now I'm 29. So, holy moly, the years have flown by. But in a way, League has been that kind of guide for me, and this is fundamentally why I'm so passionate about League, and why I think it can be such an amazing tool if viewed through this kind of unique lens of development. And so, I guess another thing to kind of mention here is, key formative choices. We all make, these key formative choices in the beginnings of our league journey, and some of which are such as duo queuing habits in the early formative stages of our journey, or starting the game, learning through support, OTPing a niche champion for a long time, or getting boosted or account swapping often. These are decisions or, things that we do that can be quite harmful in the very early stage of your journey. We all either know someone, or maybe you are one of these people that went down one of these rabbit holes in the earlier stages and had to suffer the consequences later on for these choices, because they really shaped and warped in a real negative way the league lens that we end up adopting. And so I guess my question to you guys, another question, is what do you guys think are these key markers that really tell you a lot about a player's lens? And maybe reflecting on some of your friends that maybe don't have the healthiest relationship with the game. Why are they? Why do they view the game that way? Did they disrespect the game? They played it casually. They roll swapped all the time. They jumped from champ to champ because of the meta swaps. What did they do that you feel as though was fundamentally detrimental to their league lens? So I guess to spin this in a more practical way, how is this helpful? Like, why am I making this video? Well, I truly believe that league can be a mirror if you want it to be. It can show you the reality of your actions and help you grow as a person if you're ready and able to accept that reality, because league is so brutal. It is so hard. I mean, there is nothing harder that I've done in my life than play League. I truly believe it's the hardest game in the world. You're only one person on the Rift with limited impact. The game is changing every few weeks. There is a micro component, there is a macro component. Your mental stack is completely overwhelmed at all times. The game is moving so fast. It's snowball oriented. There is so much happening. I always say it is an impossible game. And because of the complexity and the difficulty of the game, and the brutal nature of the game and the snowball nature of the game, it forces you to really be honest with yourself. Like, why am I acting this way? It can bring out the worst in you, right? And so understanding your league lens is a step in the right direction for developing self-awareness, emotional regulation, and most importantly, empathy for others. And a lot of people ask me, Curtis, how do you develop such a strong mental in game? Like, people will say shit to you in game, and they'll abuse you in game, and they'll critique your things, and I don't really let it bother me. And the reason being is that, again, I think I maybe intuitively now, or I think that's not the right word. I would say I've kind of accepted that we all have our own unique league lens. And I'm not here to judge where everyone is at in their journey. I'm not here to judge if someone believes that about the game or this about the game. We all have a different league lens, and that's okay. If some people, watch this video, they're going to think it's bullshit. That's okay too. This is not for everyone. This is, my interpretation of something that I see is very helpful, and it's something that's helped me, and I want to share this with the world. And some people will resonate, some people won't. And I think even in game, when someone flames me or they disagree with the way I play the game, that's okay too. I understand. It's we all have our own league lens. And I think for me, this empathy thing has been really helpful for developing emotional regulation, and also just having a much healthier relationship with solo queue. And like I said here, I was not only able to have a healthier relationship with League, but also, due to this process of introspection, develop more self-love and self-respect for myself. And I may be speaking for a lot of you guys out there that we love League, right? If you're watching this, you are inherently passionate about the game. To the point where sometimes it can get a little bit intense, and sometimes you can get your self-worth can get attached to your rank. And I think, again, having a little bit more understanding of maybe why I'm attaching my self-worth to my rank and getting into those weeds will, at least for me, really allowed myself to give myself more self-love, self-respect, and understand the reason I am who I am. And so I want to give some practical advice here. If you are looking to understand a little bit more about your league lens, the 5 whys. If something maybe bothers you, ask why, and then ask why again, and then ask why again. And if you do this 5 why process, it can really allow you to get to the root cause of why you really feel the way you do. And I think that it's very valuable to do this over the long run, over time, maybe not every single day, but every now and then when you get really bothered, because it can actually help you develop, again, a much healthier understanding of your league lens, and maybe address some of those core formative problems with your interpretation of the game. And so one of my favorite quotes I'll leave you guys with is, everything makes sense. If it doesn't, it's just your view of reality. All right, guys. So I hope you all were to hopefully take something away from this one. Kind of limit tested with this one. This one's quite personal. If you have any questions at all, or again, if you have any of the responses you would like to share below in the comments, that would be great. I'll be reading through some of them. Otherwise, yeah, I'll see you guys for another video soon. Catch you guys later.